No tithes. The tithe was a tax due to the Church of Rome, corresponding to the 10th part of income. In today's terms, not the 8 per thousand, 0.8% religious tax in Italy, but 100 per thousand. It isn't little, and not irrelevant was the impact that such a levy had on the growing, fragile economy of the time. The Cathars were opposed to this practice. Not only did they not ask tithes for themselves, but they didn't pay them to the Church of Rome, and they urged the people not to pay them. Entire regions, and as has happened, the richest regions in Europe back then, did not pay the tithes. It is an aspect that is never taken into consideration, but sometimes I ask myself, would such hatred not have been precisely for this reason? Or, on the contrary, would this not also have been precisely the reason for the success of the Cathars? The economic reasons, as Marx taught, are much more relevant than are generally admitted. In this case, the scholars agree that one of the principal factors for the success of Catharism was exactly that of not placing an economic burden on society, both because they didn't demand taxes and because the consolati didn't beg and lived from their own labour. Work held a fundamental role in Catharism. Weaving above all was prevalent, so much so that among the names the Cathars were called, weavers also figures. An important aspect, and of extraordinary modernity, was the institution of the so-called Cathar houses, a sort of school laboratory in which the young learn various trades and are taught to read and write. They were true, real centres of production, and among the different activities there was also the copying of the Gospels in the vulgar languages. As Anne Brennan writes, the Cathar houses cannot be assimilated to a Catholic monastery or convent. Ignoring any reasons why their doors might be closed, they were open to the world and society. With the increasing levels of persecution, they were closed. Medieval society was subdivided in 3 castes: oratores, bellatores, and laboratores. Orators, warriors, and workers. And that these last supported the other 2 is no mystery. The oratores were the men of the church, not only, page 234, the priests who were maintained by the tithes, but also the numerous mendicant brothers. There is also an aspect that is never brought to light. The multitude of religious orders and those who adhered to them was not due, as you would think, to the intensity of medieval religious sentiment, but rather to the fact that, much more prosaic, that the fiefs could not be divided, and heredity only due to primogeniture. At the death of the title holder, the cadets, that is to say, all of his younger children, must leave the castle. And where did they go? Into the monasteries and convents that were sumptuous buildings in the most beautiful locations, of great social and cultural prestige, to which the poor had no access unless as servants. The bellatores, warriors, were the feudal lords, the nobles who did not work and led a life of luxury, and were perpetually engaged in small and large wars for which they had to maintain a military force of soldiers, soldati, that, as the Italian word assoldati means, hired men. With what money? With what came from taxes, duties, and levies of every kind that burdened the shoulders of the laboratories, naturally. Cathar society was very different from that medieval tradition, and was incomparably more modern. Work had acquired great dignity, and the fiscal weight on the laboratories was far less, mostly because nothing was given to the Cathar church. No tithes, no small offerings to monks and friars. Not by chance the regions in which Catharism was most widespread were the richest and most socially advanced in Europe. Dante also speaks about these topics. Of the tithes, for example, when Dominic Guzman says that he doesn't ask the Pope to be able to consider his own tithes, which are for the poor of God, that is, the tithes that were destined for the needy, according to custom previously established by the primitive church, but at the time were forfeit instead to the church. Severe, too, is the criticism against the mendicant orders, that is, the Dominicans and Franciscans, the orders to whom the Inquisition was entrusted, put in the mouths of two illustrious exponents of the same orders, Thomas Aquinas and Bonaventure of Bagnoregio. Displaying an exceptional modernity, Dante also stigmatizes the practices of the feudal lords to allocate the fiefs to the firstborn and place the other children in monasteries and convents, without taking into account their character. Where nature comes upon discrepant fortune, like any seed outside its proper region, nature will always yield results awry. But if the world below would set its mind on the foundation nature lays as base to follow, it would have its people worthy. But you twist to religion one whose birth made him more fit to gird a sword, and make a king of one more fit for sermoning, so that the track you take is off the road. Paradise 8, 139 to 148.